Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Draftstars NFL Show for Week 4. Myself, Smatho here, and Mokera Guy are back for more Draftstars NFL action. So, welcome back to the show. How you going, mate?
Morning, Smatho. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Obviously, I need to pick myself up after Week 3's effort where I didn't go so well. Obviously, you didn't go so well as well.
Yeah, a bit of a stinker for me as well. That's all right. That happens.
It does happen. That's DFS for you. Now, mate,
right.
I'd like to welcome all the viewers here who are watching on the Draftstars platforms on Facebook and Twitter, and also here at dailyfantasyrankings.com.au, where you can find Tom's massive preview for this particular slate. Give us a little shout out, leave some feedback, or send us a like. That would be awesome that you can do so. Before we get into Week 4, we need to recap Week 3, how we had a stinker. But we do need to give a bit of a shout out to our winner from last week. It's Steven NFL was our winner last week, as I bring up his particular side. 215 fantasy points there with what we called a classic correlation stack there with the Rams, with Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee. And then they did what we call a bring back with Mike Evans there for the Bucks for 21 points there. But there was a particular player there in that flex position that I failed to roster in my sides, and that is Mr. Alexander Madison at 26 points there. Obviously, he was pretty popular, and I think you needed him if you needed to make some money last week.
Yeah, and we did talk about him, but we were a bit uncertain on the Dalvin Cook news and whether we'd get it before the slate. So we didn't talk him up too much. Ended up getting that news pretty early, so it was a good play. But yeah, that's a great lineup. Kind of a perfect correlation build. There's also a couple of low-owned Steelers there, Najee Harris and Chase Claypool, who both went quite well for kind of a mini correlation. And then, Cardinals defense against the Jaguars was pretty popular, but just a good play with Jaguars struggling so far this year.
Yeah, I love those Steelers plays because the Big Ben ended up chucking it so much last week. Like Najee Harris had like 14 receptions. It was absolutely crazy. So to look at their scores, are like, oh, geez, I didn't expect that. But to Steven NFL, congratulations, mate. That $4,935 first prize was well deserved, as you can see by the guys there on the leaderboard. Some well credentialed players who did quite well last week. As we look at the old player board, most of the guys that we talked up in our player pool did go pretty well, apart from old KJ Osborne at 4.6 points, Tyreek Hill at 9.7. He's due for a bit of a bounce back as well. But as you can see by that top 4 there, they actually went pretty well.
Yeah, it was a good week for the chalk. Hence why I struggled. Got a bit too fancy. We were just on the wrong cheap Viking, and Hill actually. Not sure about Hill. He looked like he was possibly playing a bit injured, so something to keep an eye on if there's any news before tomorrow's slate.
All right. Now, before we get on tomorrow's slate, tonight's slate, tomorrow, depending where you're watching this stream at the moment, we had a couple of questions from a couple of viewers who've been watching the show, and they asked you, Tom, as a mass mold entering player here on Draftstars, how you go about NFL contests in terms of your entries, because myself, I'm a small entry kind of guy. I might do 3, I might do 5, I might do 10, depending on how I feel on that particular day. So I end up just clicking names, hand building, and when it fits, I'm happy. But for yourself, who get into 3 figures lineups, how do you go about it? Matt asks, how do you go about your contest entries here on Draftstars?
Yeah, so I do use the the Fantasy Insiders Cruncher, which is available on Draftstars. It's not set up ideally for NFL stacking. Like it works pretty well for some other sports, but because we want to ideally stack with our quarterback and then have a bring back, it's not really set up for that. So there's a fair bit of manual, kind of like I tend to lock in a quarterback, set it to stack one or two teammates in the exposure settings. And then often I'll lock in, if I want to bring back for those stacks, then I'll lock in particular bringbacks and kind of run a few crunches for each stack, and then I just go through and kind of pick the ones that I like.
So for example, here I'm just doing the Buffalo Houston game here, where I've locked in Allen, and I've obviously paired him up with Diggs, and then I'm bring back with Cooks. That's kind of one way you can go about. Okay, let's see how many lineups I can get from that look good to you and to the eye, or you just literally just trust it with the projections in there.
No, I do go through each lineup. It's pretty fiddly process, and it takes quite a while, but I haven't found a better way to do it yet. So it's a question of if it's worth getting that extra correlation in your lineups by doing it that way or not.
Now, do you actually fiddle with the projections itself? So, for example, here, if you feel really good about a particular side, say Buffalo, do you bump up the ceiling scores and then drop a couple other teams, or is it just fine tuning different players? It's like that.
Yeah, sometimes I'll fine tune individual players, but I try not to mess with projections too much because I just bring too much kind of bias into it, and I tend to confuse myself more than anything doing it that way.
Fair enough. And do you do what we call the short list as well? So did you go through like say 50, 60, 80, 100 players and just star them all up and just try and make lineups using your player pool from there?
Sometimes just depends on the day whether I do that or not.
Yeah, so
yes, it is advisable, but again, it can bring in a bit of bias if you end up ruling out guys that were perfectly good players. You just didn't like them for whatever reason at that time.
And how long does it take you? If you started to sit down right now and build out your lineups, how long will it take you to do?
Oh, if I'm building, I think we're allowed 150 at the moment. It can take like 3 hours maybe.
Oh.
Yeah, not advisable.
Not advisable. No, not advisable at all. And obviously you don't. And obviously you don't like. Obviously you don't like late news as well, don't you?
Yeah, really cross my fingers that doesn't hit too hard.
All right. Well, speaking of late news, let's get stuck into the slate. Let me go through what we are looking at for this week. So week 4 of the NFL. I've got Draftstars to do me up a new banner for me because we have a new kickoff time here on our daylight savings states here now. So we're now at 4 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, which obviously means it's 3 a.m. in Queensland and 1 a.m. in Perth, I believe. So just check Draftstars to make sure you got the right lockout time, because you don't want to be getting up early in the morning and missing lock just in case. So there we go, $4,935 first prize, 13 games on the slate. Now, let me bring up the betting board for this week. So obviously we had a little bit of success last week. I got my Chargers up here at +6, and obviously you got your little Falcons little bet up too as well. So here is the 13 games. Again, another 9 early, 4 in the afternoon. There are some games that go over 50, and there are a lot of games around that low total as well. So from a DFS perspective, which games are you looking to target straight away?
Yeah, the highest total games both look like they'll be quite popular. Cardinals, Rams, and Chiefs, Eagles. Particularly, the Chiefs and the Rams are favoured there. So those sides of those games will be pretty heavily owned, as they always are. And then, yeah, there's a number of other good games that just sneak over the 50 mark. In particular, I don't mind the Panthers-Cowboys game. Both teams kind of, playing a lot better this year and have some shootout potential there. And what was the other game I didn't mind? I've lost it there now.
You've got the Rams, the Cardinals. You've got the Seahawks, 49ers. Any interest at 52.5 there?
Yeah, possibly. 49ers having some injury issues. So, yeah, I don't mind kind of a Seahawks upset there. Haven't really seen the best of Russell Wilson yet. So that's got to be coming at some point.
Now, I'm liking Minnesota Vikings at the +2 for my bet this week. I reckon we'll get Dalvin Cook back in the side. That probably might move the needle a little bit lower than that. So the Vikings for me. What about you, Tom? You're on a bit of a hot streak at the moment with your betting.
Yeah, 3 from 3 so far, but I don't like anything as much this week. So gone for a bit of a bigger price with the Cardinals. I don't love taking on the Rams, but I'm just going to have some faith in Kyler Murray. I think the price is $2.90.
Fair enough. All right. Now, injury news. Now, obviously, you've mentioned in your article this week that injuries are now starting to bite here in the NFL, which obviously does have some implications for daily fantasy. I was going to read out, one by one our injuries, but I thought, no, let's get it up in a little graphic here so we can show our viewers what we're looking at this week. So, Christian McCaffrey is obviously the big out for the Panthers. KJ Hamler, Julio Jones, AJ Brown from the Titans, they've both been ruled out, so that brings up some options for the Titans. Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton for the Giants are out. Javaris Landry from the Browns is also out. Elijah Moore, Marquise Valdes-Scantling for the Packers as well, and Russell Gage. Gerald Everett is in COVID protocol, so we're not quite sure if he's going to get out of it. D. Eskridge is also doubtful. And then questionable, which is also a couple of key ones here. George Kittle for the 49ers. We're not quite sure on him at the moment. Jack Doyle, Tyler Kroft, Dalvin Cook, but he's trending on playing. Aaron Jones also is trending in the right direction. Melvin Gordon and Curtis Samuel are the injuries for this week. So make sure you do check out your sources in terms of who's playing and who's not. But one of the big, I wouldn't say injuries, but I didn't mention there, but I want to ask you straight away, is that Justin Fields has been named as the starting quarterback for the Chicago. So therefore, Andy Dalton hasn't got up or has been benched. What are your initial thoughts on that particular decision?
I like the decision. I think they should be playing Fields as early as they can. Obviously didn't go too well last week when he was just terrorized by the Browns. But especially it sounds like Dalton's nowhere near 100% fit. So I think playing Fields as much as they can is the best thing to do.
All right. What about you? Also, your thoughts on this particular slate? Obviously, with the injuries now means that creates opportunity for the cheaper guys. So are we looking at more of a stars and scrubs kind of setup, or are we thinking if we're tournament to play, maybe get away from it?
Yeah, probably getting away from it for me. Obviously, that Titans situation with Jones and Brown both out opens up some minimum price players we can consider. I think Nick Westbrook, Icon, I'm not sure how to say it, Icon, and Chester Rogers, Josh Reynolds possibly are all about minimum price. And they've got to throw the ball to someone in that game, unless Derrick Henry literally runs the ball 100 times. But there's some value there, but it's like none of them have the kind of ceiling or known ceiling, at least, where we can lock them in and play a stars and scrubs. So maybe a bit of a mix, but leaning towards more of a balanced approach. And
where do you see the field going this week in terms of your chalk plays? I'm sure we'll go through position at the moment, but obviously those stackable games will be popular.
Yeah, they will be. So Chiefs and Rams have both been popular so far, as well as Derrick Henry at running back, obviously. But all of Henry, Kupp, Kelsey, Tyreek Hill are significantly more expensive this week than they have been. So I guess it should be a little bit less chalky. But yeah, still probably focusing on those games, I'd imagine.
All right, let's get into position by position as we start here with quarterback. So yes, we just talked about Justin Fields. He's down here at 12,360. Obviously, he didn't go so well in his appearances so far, but the man's a dual threat. He can run the ball. Also, he has potential in that. What are you thinking? I actually really like him this week. Naked, as they call it, just at that kind of cheaper price. But I did play him last week and got burnt, though.
Yeah, I quite like it. I think it's kind of a classic GPP play where he wasn't overly popular last week, but still everyone should be fairly scared of playing him after that 4-point performance. Much easier matchup with the Lions. I think it's kind of a good spot where the Bears can get things going for the first time this season. I believe they're changing their play caller from Coach Matt Nagy to whoever the offensive coordinator is. I think that can only help. It was really bad last week, even though they were under pressure. They just didn't give Fields a chance to perform. So, yeah, I think naked he's a pretty good play, and maybe a single stack with Allen Robinson or Darnell Mooney possibly.
All right, let's move back up towards the top of the board. Obviously, we've been getting some good success from the premium quarterbacks at the start of the season. There hasn't really been any duds so far. So Josh Allen there at 16,800 leads this lot after having an absolute breakout game last week with a 40 there. Mahomes, he's looking to get bounced back there, but he's still scoring quite well at 16,250. Kyler Murray going great guns at 15,730. Dak, Lamar, Russell, Stafford, Rodgers, and Jalen Hurts at 14,130 is probably the ones you want to be looking at the top of the board. What are your thoughts here on the top of the board for this week?
Yeah, well, Hurts, we saw last week, kind of looked like the rookie quarterback that he is. I mean, only 6 or 7 career starts, but still, despite having a terrible game in real life, 26 fantasy points. So can't really beat his dual threat abilities even at that price. And in a good matchup with the Chiefs. So I like him on the other side of the popular Chiefs stack. And then right at the top, everyone in between him and the top hard to knock, but they're all in slightly more difficult matchups. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes both have pretty easy matchups if you can find the salary to spend right up to the top there.
All right. Say we didn't have the salary. Obviously, if we don't go Fields, is anyone down below here that takes your fancy? And probably one they'll probably want to rule out straight away is the Texans quarterback, because he's right down the bottom here. There he is, Davis Mills at 8,000. Is there a potential that he could go all right? Or because obviously we're chasing against Buffalo. Buffalo is going to score a ton of points on them. Any Davis Mills love?
No.
Okay, good.
Even at minimum price, I think he needs well over 20 points to be a slate winner, and I just don't see that. He looked like kind of a deer in the headlights a bit last week.
Fair enough. I've got one for you, which probably could get away from all the Justin Fields hype. Is the one just below him, Taylor Heinicke, 12,310, back-to-back 20-plus point games. Obviously, he's throwing picks, which is obviously no good, but obviously throwing touchdowns. But what I'm liking at the moment, here's the potential to obviously rush as well. He was a bit of a college jet in terms of being a dual threat quarterback. And the matchup against Atlanta is not exactly scary as well. So that's my little pivot this week. If you want to get off Justin Fields, because obviously there's a lot of talk about him getting the start, Taylor Heinicke for me. What do you reckon there, Tom?
Yeah, I like that. He doesn't run big yards. I think we saw there 20 odd yards a game, but he does kind of have the potential to run some touchdowns in. And yeah, he's a real scrappy player. Like he'll stay in the game no matter what's happening. So yeah, I like it in that matchup.
He's almost like a little Kmart Josh Allen, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, cheaper price. All right, I don't think there's anyone else below here at 12K that you should be seriously looking at here. If not, good luck to you. All right, let's move on to the running backs. Now, obviously, the Titan situation means that Derrick Henry is in a great spot against the New York Jets at 15,970. But if you were the Jets coaching staff, you'll be just stacking the box and hopefully you can stuffing him up and hopefully have a chance against the Titans. So, how is your confidence levels on Derrick Henry this week?
Yeah, that's definitely worth considering, that they'll just do everything they can to stop him with no one else to really worry about on the field for the Titans. But yeah, the reality is that, he's twice as big as most other humans. And if he gets in any open space, doesn't matter how many people are trying to tackle him, it's a pretty hard job. So, yeah, I mean, if they do that, focus everything on him, it probably takes a bit off his ceiling, which, yeah, with the price increase, it's, you can fade him if you want. But yeah, I wouldn't be too confident in doing that.
Now, a little bit cheaper, around $90 cheaper, is Dalvin Cook there, who's on track to play at 15,890. Browns matchup is not exactly enticing, though. Probably get him at a lower ownership here, Cook. Are you interested in Dalvin this week?
No, I'm worried about the matchup, and I think they'll probably mix in Madison a fair bit until he gets his health back. So probably stay clear for this week.
Now, a guy that you've written up in your article this week on DFR is David Montgomery of the Bears at 13,160. Look at those scores. What's going on here? You like him a lot. You pumped him up again. Why are we going on the Montgomery train here?
Yeah, I don't know why I like him. I can't stop talking about him, but things just aren't working at the Bears. Similar to what I said about Fields, I feel like against the Lions, they've made a few changes to their setup this week. I think they just have to get things back on track. And we saw at the end of last season, I think he put together 6 20-plus scores in a row to finish the season. Like, he has that ceiling. So just kind of a GPP punt that things come good for him in the soft matchup.
One player that I'm not looking to play again is obviously Alvin Kamara. I'm still waiting for Draftstars to drop his price because Winston just doesn't chuck the ball. Like that's his bread and butter. Like, Kamara is actually rushing for a lot of yards. Like, I think he's on track to get a lot of touches in terms of that, but in terms of receptions, it's just Winston's not throwing the ball to anyone. So for now, Kamara's my easiest fave for this week. One particular team that I want you to tell me about is the Bills. Also, Josh Allen is going to be pretty popular with his red zone threat, but the running backs here are quite cheap, and they're looking like a good plug-in play here. So, how do you feel about the Bills running back situation?
Yeah, I like them a lot, especially Zach Moss, who he's a healthy scratch in week 1, but he's been straight back into it the last 2 weeks. Multiple touchdowns, as we can see there. So, yeah, just hard to get away from how easy that matchup is. Like, we're kind of expecting the Bills could score 40-plus points. You'd have to think, even though the Josh Allen steals a lot of their work, you'd have to think there's enough goal line opportunities there for one of those two guys to get there.
Now, also, Christian McCaffrey is now out for the Panthers, so that brings in Chuba Hubbard. He's been priced up. Obviously, Draftstars have seen that. I only scored 10.9 points last week, but he's going to get all the work that he's going to get this week, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm not actually sure, because I was watching last week and Royce Freeman actually mixed in a bit. Didn't do anything with the work, but he was taking some of the snaps. So I'm not going to say that Hubbard is just going to be like 90% Christian McCaffrey like we saw from Mike Davis last year. But yeah, he's still, that team loves using their running back, so he's still in play despite being priced up a bit.
Any other players you want to touch on before we move on?
There's not much there. I see Jonathan Taylor there with the questionable tag. He's someone that I'm considering playing because Miami usually gives up a lot to running backs, and he's got a massive ceiling and hasn't shown it so far. Just have to look into his health a bit more and figure out whether I can actually stomach that play or not.
I like the guy above him, which is DeAndre Swift at 13,660. If Detroit get behind this game, which is debatable because obviously they're looking okay, he's just still getting targets. He's still getting receptions. And obviously being a PPR game, you need to have those points from receptions. So it could be a game that he kind of busts, but at 13,660, I do like him as well, especially if you don't have the goal to play David Montgomery, which you seem to be liking playing each week. All right, well, let's move on to the next position, which is obviously wide receiver. Now, look at Devontae Adams at 19,460. He's going to be pretty hard to get up to. But as we already touched on, the Titans' injuries have created a bit of room here. So let me bring up the Titans. Here they are. So Julio Jones, AJ Brown are both out. Chester Rogers there at 6,970. And then Nick Westbrook Akini at $6,000 as well are in line to get some targets. I know you've already touched on it, but would you play these guys in tournaments, or you just stick to them in your double ups, in your head to heads?
Depends what lineups you're building. So I think they're worth playing at least one of them if you're trying to get like quite an expensive stack, like Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey is probably the most obvious example. If you want to try and jam in a few of the expensive guys, then yeah, these guys make it viable, I think. So yeah, I'm not totally fading them or anything, but I don't love them either.
Now, the other team that do have injuries is the Giants, but I'm not exactly fond of the rest of them. Galladay's there at 12,210. Colin Johnson seems to be the number 2 receiver now. He got 5 receptions last week against the Falcons. He's at 6,320. And then there's Kadarius Toney at 6,000 as well. He seems to be he'll be the wide receiver 3 for these particular guys, but not much confidence here. When you think, Tom?
Yeah, very little confidence. That game kind of sets up as like a turnover fest. Yeah, I just don't see a lot of points in that game, so hard to get there.
Straight to the point. Now, obviously, the one of the news that you have to keep an eye on is George Kittle there for the 49ers. So if he becomes a scratch, this brings in the 49ers players into play. Deebo Samuel's there at 12,380. Brenda Ayuk is at 11,660. So they're the main 2 receivers there. If Kittle is out, would you consider getting a couple of these guys in?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Deebo is a good play no matter what. He's kind of surprisingly cheap. Yeah, obviously a lot of his good form numbers has come from that week 1 game, but he does get enough work, and it's enough shootout potential in that game that I think he's too cheap anyway. And then if Kittle's out, we've seen Ayuk start to show a little bit after a terrible start to the season. So, yeah, I think he's in play as well.
All right. Let's have a look at other stackable games here. Also, you've touched on Kansas City, so you love them in this spot here. If they can come up, here we go. Tyreek Hill at 15,990. Macaulay Harbin seems to be a little bit expensive there at 10,220. And then DeMarcus Robertson, they could pop up for a red zone action at 6,000. But you probably prefer a Hill Kelsey kind of stack, wouldn't you, instead of the other KC guys?
Yeah, I would prefer it, but there's a few ways to play it because, like I said, a little bit of concern over Hill and his health. So you could stack Kelsey with a Hardman or a Robinson or even a Pringle, and hope that things go the way of Hill not playing much. Probably not likely, but yeah, you don't have to double stack the two big guns.
All right, let's go back to the top of the board then. So Devontae Adams looks pretty expensive there. I'm not sure I can get him anywhere. Cooper Kupp at 16,990. Stephen Diggs at 16,520. Justin Jefferson there at 15,510. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, DJ Metcalf. So if you're going to play one of these guys, just like say one out, or you've got enough cash to play after your stack, is there any particular personal favorite there?
I think Stephon Diggs stands out probably. Hasn't really had that big game yet, which could drag a bit of ownership away. And obviously, we love the Bills in matchup with the Texans, so just have to bet on that talent finally kind of exploding this week.
Yeah, what other stackable games that you could probably look at this week? Obviously, I've got my little sneaky Washington play there. So Terry McLaurin there at 14,140 is probably my partner there with my quarterback. Any other stackable games that you'd be looking at?
Yeah, as I said, I don't mind the Panthers Cowboys game. Both getting pretty good quarterback play and quite a few stud wide receivers available there. Obviously, yeah, CeeDee Lamb and DJ Moore, both young guns, and then not sure about Robbie with McCaffrey out. Maybe there's some more targets for the likes of Robbie Anderson and Terrace Marshall. So might be time for one or both of them to shine this week as well.
All right. There is Terrence at 7,150. That's not too bad. That's not too bad price for those particular guys, especially if they get in the shootout. You probably want some pieces in that particular game. All right, let's move on to tight end. Look, Kelsey's there is pretty exy, 16,810. Obviously, if you kind of jam in some value guys, you want to be getting up to Travis. Obviously, you need to manage George Kittle's status as well. And I do believe the 49ers are a late game. Yes, they are. So you won't have much room to pivot if you just chuck Kittle in your tight end. All of a sudden, he's out late. So what are you going to do here, the tight end, especially the top of the board here?
Yeah, it's a shame about Kittle because I wouldn't mind him in this spot otherwise. Similar type of guy who has the massive ceiling and hasn't shown it yet. Yeah, obviously it's pretty tough to get up to Kelsey, so I'm probably focusing more below the $10,000 range. Which, yeah, there's a little grouping there with Logan Thomas, who goes well with your Washington stack. Noah Fant, who should get a bit more work this week with a few of his teammates missing with injury. Don't mind the Baltimore matchup either. Their secondary is pretty banged up and struggling to slow down the pass. And then we saw last week with Mike Gesicki that the Jacoby Brissett as the quarterback there at Miami was just throwing the ball nonstop to him as kind of a safety valve type play. So he's back on the radar after a bad start to the season as well.
Now, tell me about your Philadelphia plays. You've written both up here on DFR with both Ertz and Godet. Pretty cheap.
Yeah, both cheap and both. The problem is you don't know which one's going to do it on any given week. We saw Zach Ertz come back to life last week after it looked like he'd sort of crumbled to dust in the last season and a half. But yeah, obviously I'm liking that matchup with the Chiefs, and the wide receivers are hard to put much trust in for the Eagles. So if I'm pairing anyone with Hurts, it's one of those two tight ends.
Excellent. One I might put out for you here. If Everett is out for the 49ers, Will Dissly at $5,000. The guy's banged up. He's had obviously some injuries over the run, but he's still getting targeted. Honestly, it was just the one target last week. But if Everett doesn't get up or doesn't get cleared from his COVID, then $5,000, it's worth a punt.
Yeah, I don't mind that actually. I think like Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf both might be a little bit banged up as well, so that could open up more opportunities there for Disley if he does become kind of the third string receiver.
The problem here this week, there's no Gronk. That's the thing. You've got Kittle banged up, Kelsey too much, and then you've got others. So yeah, it's a tough spot this week. Hopefully the ones you pick go pretty well. That's my advice.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the defense special teams. Look, Draftstars are doing a great job pricing these guys correctly. Obviously, again, the Texans matchup for Buffalo Bills means they're the most expensive there at $7,960. I don't mind the Packers at $7,160 against Ben Roethlisberger. I think there's some potential interception / sack potential there. Who do you like this week? Because I don't really, it's a kind of a theme at the moment. I don't really have much of a take on them, but I have planned my flag on the Packers if I have enough cash for it.
Yeah, they've definitely priced the best matchups are the most expensive ones, so that's hard to manage. I do like the Washington. I think I wrote Washington up in my article.
Yep.
We've seen. I mean, they came into the season with a reputation as possibly the best defense in the league. Young unit with just an awesome defensive line, and it just hasn't eventuated so far this season. So against the Falcons with a pretty average offensive line and Matt Ryan just completely immobile in the pocket, could be a good spot for them to finally arrive this season. And then minimum price, I don't love it, but I'm considering the Giants, mostly because Jameis Winston has a reputation as a kind of an intercept machine, but it's a bit of a different situation at the Saints. He's not really playing like he used to, so yeah, I don't love it. I think the Lions are there somewhere. They might be a chalky play based on how much Justin Fields struggled last week. But yeah, as we said, we're kind of betting on the Bears to come good this week, so don't want to do that.
No, so if you're playing Fields, don't play the Lions.
That's right.
Defense. All right. If you're crunching 100 lineups and you find yourself got multiple Lions / Fields lineups, start again. It just doesn't work like that. Yeah, I was going to mention the Lions, possibly the Seahawks, and the Cardinals. Let's see. Look, the Cardinals have some great form there. With the guy had like 5 sacks in week 1, and then obviously the Jaguars there last week. So look, it's a tougher matchup against LA, but if you're box scorer and you just say, well, $4,000 for a team that's averaging 11, sign me up. But no, it's a bit of a tough stretch this week. So there. All right. So there's position by position. So without further ado, let's bring up the player pool for this week. All right, so this week's player pool down at Smathoville. There we go. So Josh Allen, Hurts from the Eagles, Justin Fields, I put him in. Then my man Heineke, and then I'll see Kyler Murray if you like to go that particular route. Derek Henry, Montgomery. I have put Dalvin Cook in as a bit of a GPP. Let's get off Henry. Zach Moss, Chuba Hubbard, and DeAndre Swift. Westbrook, Akini, Cooks, Hill, Debo Samuel, Diggs, McLaurin, Hopkins, Moore, Reglaw if you're going that Philadelphia Hurts route, Cooper Kupp because he's Cooper Kupp. Over the page, I've put in the Philadelphia options. Kelsey if he gets up, ready to go. Andrews, Noah Fant. I didn't put Disley in there, but I should have. He can have a late invite to the pool if he wants one. Washington, Vikings, and the Packers are my defensive special teams pool players this week. So, final thoughts here, Tom. Obviously, you might have to stay up a little bit later tonight just to double check the news. Would that be the right strategy to go about it?
Yeah, it seems that way. I think most of the questionable guys will play, so not expecting any big shocks. But yeah, probably best to set the alarm and just make sure.
Now, before you go, obviously you're a big NRL man. Who's your pick tonight, mate?
Yeah, I'm on the Panthers. Would just like to see that kind of young team that's been trending for a while. Yeah, get the job done. So
Get the Panthers. I'm with you. I'm with the Panthers as well. They beat my Storm, so you want the guys who beat you to win the premiership. Now, obviously, we'll be back next week for week 5. Make sure you get on the draftstars.com.au for all your NFL daily fantasy. Keep the pools going. Big $50,000 on Monday morning. So make sure you support that. If you need any assistance at all, get on the dailyfantasyrankings.com.au. Check out Tom's article. If not, shoot us a message here on Twitter at RankingsDFS or at DraftStarsAU. Tom, thank you so much for the show. Thanks for all your insights.
all right, Smatho, and yeah, good luck with your lineups, both NRL and NFL in the next 24 hours.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, Tom. Look forward to seeing you next week. Catch you later.
All right, have a good one.